Your translator is lying, I whispered, and for one terrifying second, every sound inside the private dining room disappeared. The crystal glasses stopped clinking. The quiet jazz drifting through the speakers seemed to fade into nothing. Even the rain against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Blackthorn Hotel felt distant beneath the crushing silence that followed my words. Damien Moretti slowly turned his head toward me, and I immediately understood why grown men in this city lowered their eyes when they spoke to him. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't slam his hand on the table. He simply looked at me, and somehow that was worse. Damien was the kind of alpha who carried power like gravity. Cold, constant, impossible to ignore. His dark suit looked flawless beneath the amber chandelier light. Every inch of him controlled and unreadable except for his eyes. Those eyes were locked on me now with dangerous focus while the other men around the table shifted uneasily in their seats. I instantly regretted speaking. I wasn't supposed to be here. I was only Leo's nanny, the quiet Omega hired to take care of Damien Moretti's 7-year-old son while the city's most feared mafia family negotiated another international business deal upstairs. My place was supposed to be down the hall in the private lounge helping Leo finish his homework and pretending not to hear the conversations happening behind guarded doors. But then I heard the Russian phrase. One single word changed inside the translator's sentence. One word nobody else in the room noticed. Except me. Because my father had spent years teaching me that in organizations like this, people rarely announced danger directly. They buried it inside ordinary language where only trained ears could find it. Victor Sorin, Damien's trusted translator, stood beside the long table with perfect composure, smoothly converting the Russian delegates' words into English, while everyone listened carefully. To them, it sounded like a negotiation over shipping routes and protection agreements. To me, it sounded like a countdown. My pulse pounded so hard it hurt. Maybe I was wrong. God, I wanted to be wrong. But I knew that phrase. Transit delayed until midnight. It wasn't about cargo. It was an execution signal. I should have stayed quiet. Smart people stayed quiet around men like Damien Moretti. But then I looked toward the doorway where little Leo sat on the leather sofa with his coloring book balanced on his knees, completely unaware that something terrible might happen tonight. Leo glanced up at me with those pale gray eyes so identical to his father's, and suddenly my body moved before my fear could stop it. Your translator is lying. Victor's face changed first. Not panic. Worse. Surprise. Tiny. Controlled. But real. Damien noticed it too. I saw it happen in the slight narrowing of his eyes. Across the table, one of the Russian delegates muttered something sharply under his breath while the bodyguards around the room straightened almost in sync. The air itself felt dangerous now, thick with tension and expensive cologne and alpha pheromones pressing against my skin hard enough to make breathing difficult. Damien stood slowly from his chair, 6'4" of perfectly restrained menace, and walked toward me with calm, deliberate steps. Every instinct inside me screamed to back away, but I forced myself to stay still as he stopped inches from me. You speak Russian? He asked quietly. His voice was low and smooth, but there was something beneath it now, something sharper. Enough to know he changed the meaning. I answered, trying not to let my hands shake. Damien looked at Victor without turning his head completely. Did he? Victor recovered fast. Too fast. He gave a soft laugh and adjusted his cufflinks like this was all some misunderstanding. The Omega misunderstood an idiom, he said smoothly. He should return to the child. But Damien didn't look away from me. Not once. And when he spoke again, his voice dropped low enough that only I could hear it. Then tell me, he murmured, what was the real message? The room stayed silent long enough for me to hear the rain hitting the glass 30 floors above Manhattan. Damien Moretti did not blink as he studied my face, searching for hesitation, panic, maybe regret. I was feeling all three. But my father used to tell me that fear became dangerous only when people could smell it on you. So I forced myself to breathe, evenly, even while every alpha in the room stared at me like I had just stepped into traffic without looking. Victor recovered first. This is ridiculous, he said with a smooth laugh that sounded practiced. The Omega overheard fragments of a private negotiation and misunderstood what he heard. His tone was polite, almost amused, but there was tension hiding beneath it now. Tiny cracks forming inside his perfect composure. Damien noticed everything. Men like him survive because they noticed everything. Answer my question, Damien said quietly without taking his eyes off me. I swallowed hard. The phrase he translated as transit delayed until midnight was wrong. I explained carefully. The actual wording was closer to confirmation delayed until midnight. One of the Russian delegates suddenly shifted in his chair. Another muttered something sharp under his breath. Victor immediately cut in before anyone else could speak. Regional dialect confusion, he said quickly. Nothing more. But Damien finally looked toward the delegates, and the atmosphere changed instantly. They looked uncomfortable now. Not offended. Nervous. That was worse. Damien moved back toward the table with slow, controlled steps, while his security team subtly repositioned around the room. Nobody reached for weapons. Nobody raised their voice. That somehow made the tension feel heavier, like standing outside during a thunderstorm before the first lightning strike. Translated again, Damien ordered. Victor's jaw tightened almost invisibly. Damien, with respect, there is no reason to entertain this. Translated again. This time the softness in Damien's voice felt colder than anger. Victor hesitated for half a second too long. And that was the moment Damien decided something was wrong. I saw it happen in his expression. Tiny. Almost impossible to notice. But the temperature in the room dropped anyway. Victor turned toward the delegates and spoke rapidly in Russian while Damien watched him carefully. Then one of the older delegates answered with visible irritation. Before Victor could translate, I quietly spoke first. He said the schedule was already approved yesterday. Victor's face lost color. Damien's gaze snapped toward him immediately. Interesting, Damien murmured. Because you were about to tell me something different, were you not? Nobody spoke. Across the room, Leo looked up from his coloring book again, sensing the tension despite his headphones. The child's small shoulders tightened uneasily, and instinctively, I took a small step closer toward him. Damien noticed that too. He noticed everything. Victor straightened his tie carefully, but now there was the faintest shine of sweat near his temple. This Omega should not be here, he said, voice tighter now. He is interfering in matters beyond his understanding. Maybe, Damien replied calmly. But so far, he is the only honest person in this room. The words landed like ice water. My pulse stumbled. I did not know what frightened me more, Victor's growing panic or Damien's sudden interest in me. Because attention from a man like Damien Moretti was not safety. It was gravity. Once it locked onto you, escape became impossible. Damien slowly turned back toward me. Where did you learn Russian? He asked. I hesitated. My father's face flashed through my mind instantly. Long nights at our tiny kitchen table. Audio recordings playing through cheap speakers. Lists of coded phrases hidden inside ordinary business language. Survival lessons disguised as language lessons. My father taught me, I answered quietly. Damien's expression sharpened slightly. What was his name? Before I could answer, one of the security guards near the doorway suddenly touched his earpiece, his face changing as he listened. Then he looked directly at Damien. Sir, he said carefully, we may have a problem downstairs. The shift in Damien's expression was almost invisible, but everyone in the room reacted to it instantly. The Russian delegates stopped speaking. Victor went pale beneath the warm chandelier light. Even the security guards standing near the walls straightened subtly as tension spread through the suite like smoke. Damien accepted the phone from his guard without looking away from me. Talk, he said quietly. The man on the other end spoke too fast for me to understand clearly, but I caught enough words to feel cold settle into my stomach. Parking garage. Delivery truck. Unauthorized access. Damien listened in complete silence, his face unreadable, one hand resting loosely against the polished wood table. Calm. Controlled. Dangerous. Then his eyes flicked toward Victor for half a second. Lock the building down, he said into the phone before ending the call. Nobody moved immediately. That silence felt intentional somehow, like Damien was giving everyone in the room a chance to reveal themselves. Victor forced a tight smile. Surely this is unnecessary. Damien finally looked at him directly. You seem nervous tonight. Victor laughed softly, but it sounded brittle now. I work for you. If there is danger, naturally I am concerned. No, Damien replied. Concern smells different. The room went still again. My breath caught before I could stop it. Alpha instincts were strange things. Even suppressed, they could read tension through scent before words. And Damien Moretti was paying attention to everyone's breathing now. Everyone except Leo. The little boy had quietly climbed off the sofa and walked toward me without anybody noticing. His small fingers wrapped around the sleeve of my sweater carefully, almost shyly, and when I looked down, he pressed closer against my side without speaking. My chest tightened unexpectedly. Leo barely spoke at all according to the house staff. Some trauma after his mother died. Some silence too deep for expensive therapists to fix. Yet somehow he always drifted toward me whenever the house became tense. Damien noticed that too. Of course he did. His gaze lingered on Leo's hand, clutching my sleeve before returning to my face, with something unfamiliar behind his eyes now. Not suspicion. Something heavier. Take Leo upstairs, Damien said quietly. One of the guards stepped forward immediately, but Leo shook his head hard and tightened his grip on me instead. The movement startled everyone. Leo, Damien said gently this time, and the entire room seemed shocked by the softness in his voice. The boy still refused to let go. I felt every pair of eyes turn toward me again. It is okay, I whispered carefully, crouching slightly so Leo could see my face. You can stay with me. Leo nodded once against my shoulder. Damien exhaled slowly through his nose, watching us both with unreadable intensity. Then his phone buzzed again. Another message. His expression darkened almost instantly. Interesting, he murmured softly. Victor shifted. Tiny movement. Tiny mistake. Damien saw it immediately. Bring the car around. Damien ordered one of his guards. We are leaving. The room erupted into motion after that. Guards speaking into earpieces. The delegates gathering documents too quickly. Victor stepping closer to Damien with carefully controlled urgency. This could still be handled privately, Victor said. There is no reason to alarm the child. Damien ignored him completely. Instead, he looked at me again. You are coming with us. My heart stumbled. What? If someone compromised tonight's meeting, Damien said calmly, then the only person in this room who warned me beforehand is suddenly very valuable. Valuable. The word should not have affected me the way it did. But there was something unsettling about hearing it from Damien Moretti. Like becoming important to a hurricane. I swallowed hard. I am just Leo's nanny. Damien stepped closer then. Close enough for the scent of cedarwood and cold winter air to wrap around me completely. Alpha scent. Controlled but overwhelming. Protective and dangerous at the same time. No, he said quietly. You are something else. I just have not figured out what yet. My pulse went unsteady beneath his gaze. Around us, security rushed everyone toward the private elevators while rain hammered harder against the windows. But Damien stayed standing in front of me another second too long, studying my face with quiet focus that made my skin warm beneath my collar despite the cold room. Then Leo suddenly tugged on my sleeve again. I looked down just as the little boy finally whispered his first words to me all night. Do not let Daddy trust Victor. The elevator ride down to the underground garage felt too quiet. Rainwater streaked the mirrored walls while security surrounded us in tense silence, their hands near their earpieces every few seconds as new updates crackled through private channels. Leo stood close against my side, small fingers still gripping the fabric of my sleeve like he was afraid I might disappear if he let go. Damien noticed it constantly. Every time the elevator lights reflected across his face, I caught him watching us with the same unreadable intensity that had unsettled me upstairs. But now there was something else mixed into it. Calculation. Curiosity. Possession. The realization made my pulse turn uneven. Victor stood near the back of the elevator, unusually quiet for someone who had spent the last hour trying to control every conversation. His composure had cracked in tiny invisible places. A stiff jaw. Controlled breathing. Eyes that kept flicking toward Damien whenever he thought nobody noticed. Damien noticed. Of course he did. The elevator doors finally slid open into the private garage beneath the hotel. Black SUVs lined the concrete floor while headlights reflected off puddles dragged in by the storm outside. The air smelled like rain, gasoline, and cold metal. Damien stepped out first, one hand lightly against Leo's shoulder as guards spread through the garage ahead of us. Nobody spoke. The silence felt wrong now. Too heavy. Too careful. Then Leo suddenly stopped walking. His small body went rigid beside me. I looked down instantly. The color had drained from his face. Leo, I whispered softly. His gray eyes were locked across the garage toward a black delivery van parked near the loading dock. No logos. No plates. Just a plain vehicle sitting too still in the shadows. Damien followed Leo's stare immediately. Everything changed after that. Security shifted formation instantly around Damien and Leo, while tension exploded through the garage like an electric current. Move. One of the guards snapped sharply into his earpiece. Damien stepped slightly in front of Leo on instinct, his body becoming a shield so naturally it almost hurt to watch. Protective alpha instinct. Immediate. Absolute. But Leo was still staring at the van with visible fear. Then I noticed it too. The driver's side door was slightly open. Rainwater dripped steadily onto the concrete beneath it. No movement. No sound. Every nerve in my body tightened painfully. Damien's voice dropped lower. Get Leo upstairs. The guards moved immediately this time, but Leo grabbed my wrist before anyone could touch him. Hard enough to surprise me. Ethan, he whispered urgently. My chest tightened at the sound of my name in his small voice. Damien looked at his son with visible shock before his gaze lifted toward me again. Another shift. Another invisible line crossed between us. Then one of the guards approached the van cautiously while the rest positioned themselves around Damien. Victor suddenly stepped backward. Tiny movement. Wrong movement. Damien's head turned sharply toward him. Where are you going? Victor forced a calm smile. I left documents upstairs. Nobody believed him. The guard nearest the van reached the open driver's door carefully and looked inside. His expression changed instantly. Sir, he said tightly, there is nobody in here. Damien's eyes narrowed. Then why abandon the vehicle? Nobody answered because at that exact moment, every light in the garage went out. Darkness swallowed the entire underground level. Someone cursed nearby. Leo gasped softly and pressed into my side, while alarms suddenly echoed somewhere deeper inside the building. Red emergency lights flickered weakly overhead, bathing the garage in dim crimson shadows. My pulse slammed painfully against my ribs. Then I heard it. A phone vibrating. Close. Very close. Damien heard it too. The low sound cut through the darkness sharply enough that every guard froze. Victor slowly looked down toward his jacket pocket. Mistake. Fatal mistake. Damien moved before anyone else could react, crossing the distance between them in seconds with terrifying calm. He took the phone directly from Victor's hand, while the translator went pale beneath the red emergency lighting. Nobody breathed. Damien looked down at the screen silently. One unread message glowed across the display. Target confirmed. Omega is with Moretti. For one endless second, nobody moved. The red emergency lights flickered across Damien's face while he stared down at the glowing message on Victor's phone, his expression so calm it became terrifying. Target confirmed. Omega is with Moretti. The words seemed to echo inside my skull louder than the alarms pulsing faintly through the garage. Omega. Not Nanny. Not witness. They knew exactly what I was. Cold spread through my chest so fast it hurt. Victor looked like he wanted to speak, but Damien slowly lifted his eyes first, and whatever explanation had been forming instantly died in the translator's throat. Damien did not look angry. That was the problem. He looked focused, controlled in the way storms became controlled right before destruction. Take Leo upstairs, he said quietly without looking away from Victor. This time Leo did not argue. The child stared at the phone screen with frightened confusion before looking up at me instead, his small fingers tightening painfully around my hand. Ethan comes too, he whispered immediately. One of the guards moved closer. Sir, it is safer if he comes with us, Damien interrupted softly. Nobody challenged him after that. The emergency lights cast shifting crimson shadows across the garage as Damien guided us toward the armored SUV waiting near the elevators. I could feel Victor watching me the entire time. Not fear. Not guilt. Recognition. That unsettled me more than the message itself. Like he knew something I did not. Rain slammed against the roof of the vehicle the moment the doors shut behind us. The city outside blurred into streaks of red and white as the convoy pulled into Manhattan traffic under heavy security escort. Nobody spoke for the first few minutes. Leo sat pressed against my side in the back seat, unusually quiet, while Damien occupied the seat across from us with Victor's phone still resting in one hand. The glow from the screen illuminated his sharp features every few seconds whenever new messages appeared. I tried not to look at him directly, but it was impossible not to feel him. Alpha presence filled confined spaces differently. Damien's scent wrapped through the dark interior of the SUV like cedarwood, cold rain, and something heavier underneath now. Protective instinct sharpened by stress. Dangerous. Addictive in ways that made my pulse feel unsteady. I hated that my Omega instincts noticed it at all. How did they know? I finally asked quietly. Damien's gaze lifted immediately. That is what I intend to find out. No. I whispered, unable to stop myself. How did they know I was an Omega? Silence. Leo shifted beside me. Damien studied my face carefully now, watching every reaction like he was piecing together fragments of a puzzle. You hide your scent well, he said after a moment. Too well for ordinary suppressants. My throat tightened. That is none of your business. The words came out sharper than intended. One of the guards in the front seat glanced back nervously, probably expecting Damien Moretti to react badly to being spoken to that way. Instead, Damien leaned back slightly, eyes never leaving mine. Everything involving my son is my business. Emotional exhaustion hit me so suddenly it almost felt physical. The last few hours had shattered every careful rule I lived by. Stay invisible. Stay quiet. Never let powerful alphas notice you. Yet here I was trapped inside an armored SUV beside the most feared alpha in New York, while unknown people hunted me for reasons I still did not understand. Leo slowly rested his head against my arm, exhausted from stress and fear. The movement was small, instinctive, trusting. Damien's expression shifted the moment he saw it. Softer. Not much, but enough to hurt something inside me unexpectedly. He does not usually do that, Damien said quietly. I looked down at Leo carefully. His eyes were already drifting closed despite the chaos around us. Maybe he is tired. No, Damien murmured. He does not trust people. The confession lingered heavily between us. I did not know what to say to that because the truth was even worse. I did not trust people either, especially not men like Damien Moretti. But somehow, sitting inside that dark SUV with rain hammering outside and Leo asleep against me, I realized I had stopped planning how to escape hours ago. That terrified me more than the threat itself. Damien's phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen once, and for the first time all night, genuine emotion cracked through his control. Shock, then anger, then something colder. Slowly, he lifted his eyes toward me. Ethan, he said softly, why does someone have a 20-year-old file connecting your father to my organization? The inside of the SUV suddenly felt too small to breathe in. Rain hammered the windows hard enough to blur the entire city into streaks of silver and red, while Damien's question hung between us like a blade neither of us wanted to touch. Leo was still asleep against my shoulder, warm and trusting in a way that made my chest ache unexpectedly, but every muscle in my body had gone rigid. 20-year-old file. My father. Damien's organization. No, that was impossible. My father had spent his entire life warning me about men like Damien Moretti, about syndicates that swallowed people whole and called it loyalty, about coded language hidden beneath polite conversations, and how survival depended on hearing what powerful people were really saying. But he had never once admitted he worked for them. You are wrong, I said quietly, though even to my own ears the words sounded weak. Damien studied me in silence for several seconds too long. I do not think I am. His voice remained calm, but there was pressure beneath it now. Careful restraint. Dangerous curiosity. The file is heavily restricted. Most of it was erased years ago. My stomach twisted painfully. Then maybe it should stay erased. One of Damien's guards shifted in the front seat, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation, but Damien barely noticed. His attention stayed fixed completely on me now. Obsessively. Your father's name was Daniel Hale, he said quietly. My pulse stumbled. I hated hearing my father's name in his mouth. He worked under a man named Adrian Vale. Linguistic operations. Internal negotiation cleanup. Every word hit harder than the last, because pieces of my childhood suddenly started rearranging themselves into something ugly. The late-night phone calls my father always took outside. The fake names. The way he checked exits everywhere we went. The coded recordings he made me memorize before I was old enough to understand why. My throat tightened painfully. Stop. Damien ignored me. 3 months before his death, your father disappeared with classified files connected to my family. The air left my lungs. Leo stirred softly against me from the sudden tension in my body, and instinctively, I wrapped an arm around him tighter. Protective. Automatic. Damien's eyes dropped briefly to the movement before lifting back to my face again, sharper now. You did not know, he realized quietly. Something inside me cracked at the sound of that. Because he sounded almost relieved. Like my ignorance mattered to him for reasons I did not understand. He died in a car accident, I whispered. Damien's expression darkened slightly. That is the official story. Silence swallowed the SUV again except for rain and distant traffic. My chest hurt. Nothing felt stable anymore. Every memory of my father suddenly carried hidden weight beneath it, and I hated how Damien seemed to understand parts of my life better than I did. Why are they targeting me? I finally asked softly. Damien did not answer immediately. That frightened me more than if he had. Because somebody believes your father left something behind, he said at last. And they think you know where it is. I shook my head instantly. I do not. I believe you. The words hit me harder than they should have. My eyes lifted toward him before I could stop myself. Damien Moretti was not supposed to trust easily. Men like him survived by assuming betrayal came from everyone. Yet he believed me. Or worse, he wanted to. That realization wrapped around my ribs painfully. The SUV finally turned into a private underground entrance beneath one of Damien's high-rise properties downtown. Security gates opened immediately while armed guards flooded the garage before we even stopped moving. Safe house. Fortress. Prison. I no longer knew the difference. Damien stepped out first when the vehicle stopped, then turned back toward me before anyone else could open my door. Rain-cooled air rushed inside around him, carrying the sharp scent of cedar and storm water that instantly tangled with my senses again. You and Leo stay near me, he said quietly. Not an order this time. Something more personal, more dangerous. I swallowed hard and carefully shifted Leo in my arms to wake him gently. But the moment the child opened his eyes, his face went pale with fear. He was staring past Damien toward the garage entrance. Daddy, he whispered shakily. Damien turned instantly. So did every guard in the garage. A black sedan had just rolled slowly through the final security gate. No alarm sounded. No guard stopped it, which meant whoever was inside already had Moretti authorization codes. Then the back door opened, and Victor stepped out smiling softly while holding a silver keycard in one hand. You really should have listened to me earlier, he said calmly. Because now they know where the boy is too. The garage went so quiet that I could hear Leo's uneven breathing against my shoulder. Victor stood beside the black sedan beneath the harsh fluorescent lights, looking perfectly composed despite the armed guards surrounding him. Rainwater still clung to the shoulders of his coat, tiny silver droplets sliding down dark fabric, while he held the access card loosely between his fingers like he had all the control in the world. Damien stepped slightly in front of us, without hesitation. The movement was smooth, instinctive, absolute. 1 second I could see the entire garage clearly. The next, all I could see was the broad line of Damien's back shielding me and Leo from whatever was about to happen. My pulse turned painfully unsteady. You brought them here? Damien asked quietly. Victor sighed like the question disappointed him. I tried to avoid this. You sold my security clearance. No, Victor corrected softly. I traded information for survival. Leo's fingers curled tightly into my sweater again. I could feel the small tremor running through him now. Fear. Real fear. The kind children sensed before adults admitted danger existed. Damien must have felt it too because his scent changed instantly. Cedarwood sharpened with something colder underneath, protective instinct pushing through his calm restraint hard enough that even I could feel the pressure of it in the air. Enough, Damien said. Victor's expression finally cracked a little at that word. Not fear. Sadness. That confused me more than anything else tonight. You still do not understand what is happening, Victor murmured. If they believe Ethan has the archive, they will never stop looking. Archive. Another word I did not understand. Another piece of my father's hidden life reaching into mine like a ghost. My chest tightened painfully. I do not have anything, I whispered. Victor looked directly at me then, and for the first time all night, his expression softened. That is exactly why this became dangerous. Damien turned his head slightly toward me. Tiny movement, but enough for me to catch the shift in his eyes. He believed Victor knew more than he was saying. Worse, Damien was starting to believe I had spent my entire life inside a secret I did not even know existed. Talk clearly, Damien ordered. Victor smiled faintly. Your father never told you about the recordings? My stomach dropped so fast it physically hurt. Recordings. Memory flashed instantly. Old cassette tapes hidden in kitchen drawers. My father teaching me languages through strange coded conversations late at night. Practice exercises, he always called them. Training your ear. Ethan, Damien said quietly. Look at me. I did not realize I had stopped breathing until his voice cut through the panic. His eyes held mine steadily now, grounding and terrifying at the same time. Whatever your father hid, he said softly, you are not facing this alone anymore. Something inside me almost broke hearing that. Because nobody had said words like that to me in years. Not since my father died. Not since the world taught me survival meant isolation. Yet Damien Moretti, the man I should fear most, was standing between me and danger like protecting me had already become instinct. I hated how much that affected me. Victor noticed too. That is the problem, he said quietly. He gets attached. Damien's expression darkened instantly. Careful. You think this is protection, Victor continued, voice calmer now. But you are repeating history. The air changed again. Damien went completely still. Around us, even the guards sensed something deeply wrong beneath those words. My heartbeat thudded painfully against my ribs. What history? I asked softly. Victor looked at me with genuine pity this time. Your father worked for Damien's family because they promised him safety too. Silence crushed the garage. Leo looked up at Damien immediately, confusion clouding his pale gray eyes. I felt my own trust fracture painfully down the middle. Damien did not deny it. That hurt more than if he had. Ethan, Damien said carefully, turning toward me fully now, listen to me. But fear had already started spreading through my chest like ice water because suddenly every warning my father ever gave me sounded different in my head. Never trust powerful men who make you feel safe. I took one unconscious step backward. Tiny movement. Tiny betrayal. Damien noticed instantly. The look that crossed his face lasted less than a second, but it hit hard enough to steal my breath. Hurt. Real hurt. Then his phone rang sharply through the garage. One of his guards answered first, face draining of color almost immediately. Sir, the guard said tightly. The penthouse was breached 20 minutes ago. Leo's entire body froze beside me. My room, he whispered in sudden panic. The guard swallowed hard. Sir, they left something behind for the child. The drive to the penthouse felt colder than the storm outside. Nobody spoke after the call from security. Leo sat curled against me in the back seat, unusually silent now, his small fingers wrapped tightly around the sleeve of my coat while the city lights blurred across the rain-covered windows. Damien remained across from us, one arm resting against the dark leather seat, his expression unreadable in the dim glow of passing traffic. But every few seconds, his eyes lifted toward me again, watching, measuring, waiting to see if I would pull further away after what Victor revealed. The truth was I wanted to. My father's warnings echoed too loudly in my head now. Yet every time fear pushed me backward emotionally, something else pulled harder in the opposite direction. The memory of Damien stepping in front of us without hesitation. The way Leo instinctively searched for him whenever danger appeared. The quiet certainty in Damien's voice when he told me I was not alone anymore. That was the cruelest part. Safe things were not supposed to feel dangerous. The penthouse security floor looked untouched when we arrived. Marble floors, silent hallways, soft golden lighting reflecting against walls of glass overlooking Manhattan. But the air felt wrong immediately. Too still, too empty. Leo noticed first. He stopped walking halfway down the hallway toward his room, his face pale beneath the warm lighting. Daddy, he whispered softly. Damien crouched slightly beside him. Stay with Ethan. The tenderness in his voice made my chest tighten unexpectedly. Guards swept ahead carefully while Damien stayed close enough that I could feel his presence behind me like warmth against cold skin. Then we reached Leo's bedroom door. It stood partially open. Light spilled softly across the hallway carpet. One of the guards pushed it open completely, but nobody entered at first, because the room itself looked untouched. The books remained perfectly organized on the shelves. The blankets neatly folded across the bed. Rain tapped gently against the massive windows overlooking the city skyline. Everything looked normal except for one thing sitting directly in the center of Leo's bed. A small cassette tape. My entire body went cold. Damien saw my reaction instantly. Ethan. I could barely breathe. Old memory crashed through me all at once. My father sitting beside our tiny kitchen radio late at night, while cassette tapes spun endlessly beneath yellow lamplight. Language drills, he always claimed. Lessons. But now I understood why he never let anyone else hear them. Leo looked confused as Damien carefully picked up the tape. No label. No markings. Just black plastic worn slightly at the edges with age. "There is a player downstairs," Damien said quietly. "No," I whispered immediately. Every instinct inside me screamed against this. Damien's eyes locked onto mine sharply. "You know what this is." It was not a question. I swallowed hard. My father used to make recordings like that. Silence settled heavily between us again. Damien studied me for several long seconds before nodding once toward the private elevator leading downstairs. Nobody argued. The library beneath the penthouse felt warmer than the rest of the building. Dark wood shelves, amber lamps, rain sliding slowly across massive windows overlooking the sleeping city. Damien inserted the cassette himself into an old player hidden inside one of the cabinets, while Leo sat beside me curled under a blanket one of the housekeepers brought down in silence. My pulse thudded painfully against my ribs the moment the tape clicked on. Static crackled softly first. Then my father's voice filled the room. Older, tired, but unmistakable. "If you are hearing this, Ethan, then they finally found you." My vision blurred instantly. Leo looked up at me in confusion, while Damien went completely still across the room. "There are things I hid from you because I wanted you to have a normal life," my father continued quietly through the speakers. "But if Damien Moretti is with you now, then normal was never possible." My breath caught painfully. Damien's expression changed for the first time since I met him. Shock. Real shock. "Damien," my father's voice said softly now. "If you are hearing this too, then it means I failed to keep my promise." Silence swallowed the room except for the rain outside and the soft spinning hiss of the cassette tape. Then my father spoke one final sentence that made Damien suddenly look at me like the entire world beneath him had just shifted. "Protect my son better than you protected me." The cassette tape kept spinning long after my father's voice disappeared. Soft static filled the library while nobody moved. Rain traced silver lines across the tall windows overlooking Manhattan, the city lights glowing faintly through the storm like distant stars beneath dark water. I could not stop staring at Damien. Something inside him had shifted completely. The calm control he carried like armor since the moment I met him had cracked in silent places after hearing my father's voice. Especially that last sentence. "Protect my son better than you protected me." Damien slowly sat down across from me without taking his eyes off the tape recorder. For the first time, he looked tired. Not physically. Something deeper. The kind of exhaustion powerful men carried when they had been surviving too long without forgiveness. Leo quietly climbed into his father's lap without saying a word. Damien wrapped an arm around him automatically, holding his son close while staring down at the spinning cassette like it held pieces of a life he thought was buried years ago. "Your father saved me once," he said finally. His voice sounded rougher now, honest in a way I had never heard from him before. My chest tightened painfully. "Saved you from what?" Damien looked toward the rain-streaked windows for several seconds before answering. "Becoming someone worse." Silence settled softly between us. Not hostile this time, just heavy with things none of us fully understood yet. Leo rested his head against Damien's chest sleepily, while Damien absent-mindedly brushed his fingers through the child's dark hair. The sight hurt in the strangest way. Gentle. Human. Nothing like the monster the city whispered about in dark corners. "My father never talked about you," I admitted quietly. Damien gave a faint, humorless smile. That was probably intentional. I looked down at my hands. He warned me about powerful men my entire life. He should have. The honesty of that answer caught me off guard. Damien leaned back slightly, eyes shadowed beneath the warm library lights. "Your father worked inside my family's organization when we were younger. He handled negotiations, translations. He heard things nobody else noticed." My throat tightened. Like me, Damien's gaze lifted immediately. Intense. Unavoidable. Exactly like you. Something fragile shifted painfully inside my chest hearing that. All night, I had felt like I was drowning in secrets left behind by dead people. But somehow Damien looked at me like I was not broken by them. Like he recognized me. That scared me more than danger ever could. "The archive Victor mentioned," Damien continued quietly, "was evidence. Names. Deals. Corruption inside families powerful enough to erase people. I swallowed hard. And my father stole it. No, Damien's eyes darkened slightly. He protected it. The rain outside softened gradually, turning into a quiet, steady rhythm against the glass. Leo had fallen asleep completely now, curled against Damien with the kind of trust children gave only when they felt safe. Damien looked down at his son for a long moment before speaking again. After Leo's mother died, he murmured softly. He stopped talking to almost everyone. My chest tightened again. Except me. Damien nodded once. I think he recognized something familiar. Fear. I asked before I could stop myself. Damien's gaze returned to mine slowly. Loneliness. The words settled between us with dangerous intimacy. Because he was right. I had been lonely for years in ways I stopped admitting even to myself. And somehow, inside this rain-soaked penthouse full of old secrets and hidden dangers, the one person beginning to feel impossible to leave behind was Damien Moretti. The realization terrified me. Maybe it terrified him too. Because when I finally stood to carry Leo upstairs to bed, Damien stood immediately beside me without thinking, his hand brushing lightly against my wrist for one brief second as he helped adjust the sleeping child in my arms. Warm skin, gentle pressure, tiny contact. But my pulse reacted instantly anyway. Damien noticed. His eyes flickered toward me sharply before softening with something quieter. Something dangerously close to longing. Upstairs, the storm had finally started clearing beyond the windows. Manhattan glittered beneath the fading rain, while early morning light slowly crept between the skyscrapers. I tucked Leo carefully beneath his blankets while Damien stood silently in the doorway watching us both. The room felt different now. Safer somehow, but not peaceful, because unresolved things still lingered between us like unspoken gravity. I turned to leave after making sure Leo was asleep, but Damien quietly spoke my name before I reached the door. Ethan. I looked back immediately. He stood in the dim hallway light with his suit jacket gone.